is now 7:06. You have exactly 8 hours and 54 minutes to think about why you read, to ponder the error of your ways.
Few films capture the spirit of teenage rebellion like The Breakfast Club. Released in 1985 and written by John Hughes, it brought 5 students from different worlds together in Saturday detention and turned their emotional struggle into a timeless coming-of-age story. But behind the iconic moments and simple setting lies a maze of secrets, improvisations, and controversies most viewers never knew existed. From bizarre production choices to unsettling deleted scenes, the movie hides layers that make it stranger and darker than its cheerful image suggests. So, let's uncover 20 of the weirdest, most shocking truths behind The Breakfast Club, beginning with facts so surprising they could change how you see this 80s classic forever. The deleted darker director's cut. Before the version we all know, The Breakfast Club reportedly had a far darker tone. According to long-standing industry whispers and crew recollections, writer-director John Hughes originally shot an extended cut, lasting nearly 2.5 hours. Within it, deleted scenes revealed bleak and tragic fates for each character. Allegedly, Bender was shown committing suicide, Claire undergoing plastic surgery, Brian dying of a heart attack from stress, and Allison becoming a forgotten poet. These elements would have shifted the film's message from hopeful rebellion to existential despair. Some reports claim Hughes wanted to underline the long-term consequences of social labels, how adulthood might crush youthful defiance. But the darker footage never reached theaters, and Hughes himself later trimmed the story for pacing and tone. To date, that extended version remains unreleased and possibly lost. Yet, cast members including Ali Sheedy have hinted at unseen material they once filmed but never viewed again. Whether those specific tragic outcomes ever existed on celluloid is uncertain, but the evidence suggests the film could have once explored the destruction of innocence instead of its preservation. It is a haunting thought. The movie that taught a generation to look past stereotypes may have originally ended with despair instead of understanding. The Oregano joint scene. One of the film's most memorable scenes shows the 5 teens passing around a joint, symbolically breaking social barriers in a smoky haze. But what they were smoking wasn't marijuana, it was oregano. Production sources reveal that because some of the actors were underage and the studio wanted to avoid legal or moral complications, a harmless kitchen herb became the stand-in for pot. In 1980s Hollywood, teen drug use on screen was already controversial. Using oregano gave the illusion of authenticity without any real risk. The cast still had to inhale it repeatedly for multiple takes, and several later joked that the smoke was so thick it burned their throats worse than the real thing. Ironically, the scene's realism came from their discomfort. The laughter, coughing, and dazed body language weren't entirely scripted. They were natural reactions to the irritation caused by the substitute smoke. This moment, intended to show their rebellious unity, became a strange exercise in method acting without actual drugs. The production team's solution also reflected how carefully John Hughes balanced realism with studio censorship. The Breakfast Club wanted to depict authentic teenage life, but without crossing moral boundaries that could endanger its PG-13 rating or public image. So, that unforgettable haze of teenage liberation, it smelled less like weed and more like an Italian kitchen. The dandruff scene used Parmesan cheese. Few moments in The Breakfast Club are as oddly memorable as Allison's dandruff snowstorm. While sketching quietly, she shakes her hair, letting white flakes drift over her drawing. It looks like dandruff, but what the audience actually sees is Parmesan cheese. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, the filmmakers needed something that would catch light under the cameras while falling slowly enough to look visible. Real dandruff would have been too fine, and soap flakes reflected light unnaturally. So, someone suggested food. Parmesan cheese turned out to be the perfect choice. It was light, flaky, and had a believable texture. For Ali Sheedy, who played Allison, the moment became iconic. She later explained that her character's peculiar habits reflected a misunderstood artistic personality rather than pure weirdness. Ironically, what was supposed to look unappealing on screen was literally edible and aromatic. The crew reportedly laughed between takes as the smell of cheese filled the air while the camera rolled. This inventive choice demonstrates John Hughes' commitment to practical creativity. Instead of relying on visual effects, his team used ordinary materials to achieve realism. What began as a minor prop decision has become one of the film's most discussed behind-the-scenes anecdotes, a scene that's both visually poetic and strangely appetizing. So the next time you rewatch that sequence, remember, Allison's loneliness and self-expression were brought to life by a sprinkle of grated cheese. The oppressively hot library set. The iconic library where the Breakfast Club unfolds wasn't a real school library. It was a massive set built inside a high school gym. Specifically, the crew transformed the gymnasium of the closed Maine North High School in Des Plaines, Illinois, into a two-story library with glass walls, staircases, and skylights. It looked stunning on camera, but in practice, it was a nightmare. Because of the heavy lighting required for film exposure, the temperature on set routinely exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Cast and crew members recalled feeling dizzy during long shooting days. Some production staff had to stay awake in an upstairs observation area just to ensure no one fainted during takes. John Hughes wanted the set's layout to visually trap the students while symbolizing their social barriers. Ironically, that design also trapped heat. The intense discomfort added a subtle authenticity to the characters' frustration and exhaustion. Emilio Estevez later joked that the sweat scene in certain scenes wasn't acting. It was survival. The Maine North High building, long abandoned, became a time capsule of 1980s film history. After production ended, it was used temporarily by the Illinois State Police before eventually being repurposed for training. What appeared on screen as a calm, air-conditioned school library was, in truth, an overheated pressure cooker that forced real tension into every performance. The iconic fist pump was improvised. Few images define the Breakfast Club more than Bender's triumphant walk across the football field, raising his fist to the sky as "Don't You Forget About Me" plays. That single moment became one of the most iconic freeze frames in cinema history, but incredibly, it wasn't in the script. Judd Nelson, who played John Bender, improvised the gesture during the final take of the day. Director John Hughes loved it so much that he kept it as the ending shot, and the pose perfectly captured Bender's rebellious spirit and sense of quiet victory, a simple act of defiance that resonated with audiences around the world. According to interviews, Nelson felt that after everything his character had endured, Bender wouldn't walk away defeated. The raised fist was his personal statement of survival and pride. The crew wasn't even sure how to end the shot until Nelson's spontaneous action gave it emotional closure. Over time, that moment became one of cinema's most referenced images, appearing in everything from Pitch Perfect to Easy A. It's a universal symbol of teenage triumph against misunderstanding. The fact that it was born from pure instinct, not planning, makes it even more powerful. A single improvised movement turned an ordinary ending into a cultural emblem, proving that sometimes the most unforgettable moments in film happen when no one expects them. Molly Ringwald originally cast as Allison. Before she became the stylish Princess Claire Standish, Molly Ringwald was supposed to play Allison Reynolds, the eccentric outsider. According to multiple production accounts, John Hughes initially offered Ringwald the role of Allison, the basket case, believing she could portray a misunderstood loner with depth. However, Ringwald disagreed. She insisted that she identified more with Claire, the popular but emotionally complex girl, struggling beneath her privileged image. After discussions with Hughes, he switched the roles, giving Ali Sheedy the part of Allison instead. This decision completely altered the film's emotional balance. Ringwald's portrayal of Claire added subtle vulnerability to the princess archetype, while Sheedy turned Allison into one of the most relatable characters in teen cinema. Had Ringwald remained as Allison, the film's chemistry might have been completely different. Hughes's Brat Pack films often revolved around archetypes colliding, and this casting swap preserved that contrast. Interestingly, some early concept photos reportedly show Ringwald styled as Allison before the change. For Ringwald, the switch marked one of the most significant turning points in her career. Her role as Claire cemented her status as the face of 1980s teen culture, while Sheedy's haunting quietness gave the Breakfast Club its emotional backbone. Sometimes the greatest cinematic decisions come from creative disagreement, and in this case, it created two unforgettable performances. The hidden Confederate-style flag in the library scene. In one of the most energetic moments of The Breakfast Club, the "We Are Not Alone" dance montage, a surprising visual detail hides in plain sight. Among the colorful library decorations, a flag resembling the Confederate battle emblem can be spotted briefly in the background. According to film analysts, the flag was actually the Georgia state flag of the time, which still incorporated the Confederate design in its corner. While likely chosen at random by the set decorators to fill the space, the inclusion has drawn criticism in recent years for its unintentional symbolism. In 1985, this detail went largely unnoticed, but modern viewers examining high-definition restorations have pointed it out online. The presence of such imagery adds an unexpected layer of historical context to the movie. It reflects how casually controversial symbols once appeared in media, especially before widespread cultural sensitivity toward them grew. There's no evidence John Hughes or Universal Pictures intended any racial or political statement. It was probably just a prop oversight. Still, the flag's presence remains an eerie reminder of how cultural artifacts evolve in meaning over time. What was once just another background decoration now reads differently to modern audiences, adding a subtle but strange controversy to one of the most beloved films of its era. The title has nothing to do with breakfast. For a film called The Breakfast Club, you might expect at least one morning meal, but the characters never actually eat breakfast. The entire movie takes place after 7 a.m. on a Saturday and features lunch, but no breakfast scene. So where did the title come from? According to several sources, the phrase Breakfast Club originated from a real school's nickname for early morning detention. Students who had to meet with teachers before classes jokingly called themselves the Breakfast Club. John Hughes heard the term from a friend's son and decided it perfectly captured the spirit of reluctant unity. The irony is that the film's detention happens on a Saturday, no classes, no early morning routine, and no breakfast. Still, the name works metaphorically. It implies a forced social gathering where people from different circles share something in common, even if it's just time and boredom. The title's mismatch between literal meaning and emotional tone adds to the film's charm. It's quirky, memorable, and slightly misleading, much like the story itself. Fans have since debated whether Hughes intentionally used the title as irony or simply liked its rhythm. Either way, the phrase became iconic, representing not just the movie, but a generation of young people learning that labels don't define them. The burned locker that explains Brian's story. Early in the movie, just before the camera pans through the empty school hallways, viewers can spot a burned locker door. It's a blink and you'll miss it detail, but it has hidden meaning. The scorched metal is a visual clue to Brian's confession later in the film, where he admits he brought a flare gun to school that accidentally went off in his locker. This small piece of background storytelling connects the film's opening visuals with Brian's inner turmoil. John Hughes was meticulous about such details. By showing the locker before the audience even meets the characters, he quietly foreshadows one of the most important emotional reveals in the movie. Fans on Reddit and in film analysis forums have since discussed the scene as an example of Hughes' visual storytelling. The burned locker makes Brian's later monologue feel more grounded, turning what could have been a throwaway joke into a dark commentary on academic pressure. It's easy to miss this link unless you've watched the movie multiple times, but it demonstrates how The Breakfast Club was crafted with symbolic care. Even in a film mostly set in one room, every background detail mattered. Next time you see that empty hallway, remember, it's not just setting the tone, it's whispering the story of a lonely student who almost made a tragic choice. Genuine reactions on set were unscripted. One reason that The Breakfast Club feels so authentic is that many of the actors' reactions were completely real. John Hughes often encouraged improvisation, allowing the cast to explore emotions naturally. In one memorable example, when the janitor Carl asks for $50 to keep the principal's secret, Paul Gleason's reaction was spontaneous. He wasn't expecting the line. Moments like this added realism and unpredictability to the film. The cast, many of whom were in their 20s playing teenagers, were told to think and respond as if they were truly trapped in detention. Hughes trusted their instincts, often letting the cameras roll long after the scripted dialogue ended. Several monologues, including Judd Nelson's emotional outburst about his abusive father, were partly improvised. Hughes was known to film multiple takes, then splice together the most authentic ones. What looks perfectly written on screen is sometimes just raw emotion caught in real time. That spontaneity is why The Breakfast Club doesn't feel like a typical 80s teen comedy. It captures awkward silences, overlapping speech, and emotional bursts that couldn't have been rehearsed. Hughes later said he wanted the film to sound like how teenagers really talk. Unscripted reactions gave the film a heartbeat and made its dialogue timeless. The real high school setting. Hughes's unforgettable detention setting wasn't just a Hollywood studio. It was filmed inside Maine North High School, a real abandoned high school in Des Plaines, Illinois. The production crew transformed the school's old gym into the iconic library set, carefully constructing it from scratch because the real library wasn't large enough for filming. This choice lent the movie a haunting authenticity. The lockers, hallways, and classrooms were remnants of a real educational institution that had closed its doors years earlier. The silence of empty corridors and the echo of footsteps created the eerie yet familiar vibe that every viewer subconsciously connects to their own school days. Filming in an actual abandoned school also brought logistical quirks. Cast and crew often reported odd noises at night, and some even claimed the building was haunted. Though unconfirmed, those rumors fed into the tension and realism of the characters' emotional outbursts, almost as if the walls themselves held decades of teenage angst. Hughes chose the location for both practicality and symbolism. He wanted The Breakfast Club to feel like a story that could happen anywhere, in any town, to any group of students. Shooting in a genuine empty school captured that sense of universality perfectly, making the building not just a backdrop, but a silent character in the film. Molly Ringwald almost didn't get the role. It's hard to imagine The Breakfast Club without Molly Ringwald as Claire Standish, the self-assured princess. But surprisingly, Ringwald nearly didn't land the role that defined her 1980s stardom. Initially, director John Hughes envisioned Ringwald as Allison, the dark, introverted basket case later played by Ali Sheedy. But Ringwald pushed back, insisting she was better suited for Claire. Studio executives doubted her ability to play a preppy socialite, and casting delays caused friction between her and Hughes. Ringwald's bold insistence paid off. Her performance became iconic, capturing the contradictions of teenage privilege and insecurity. Yet, behind the scenes, tensions persisted. Some reports claim Hughes preferred Ali Sheedy's raw approach, while others say Ringwald's mother intervened during contract negotiations, causing on-set awkwardness. Despite the early tension, Hughes and Ringwald developed a creative synergy that extended into later collaborations, like 16 Candles and Pretty in Pink. Still, The Breakfast Club almost had an entirely different face if those casting disagreements hadn't been resolved. The near miss underscores how delicate the chemistry of a classic can be. Had Ringwald been cast as Allison instead of Claire, the group's dynamic might have shifted entirely, and one of cinema's most beloved teenage ensembles might never have clicked the same way. Judd Nelson's method acting caused real problems. Judd Nelson's intense portrayal of John Bender, the rebellious criminal, came at a cost. Nelson fully embraced method acting, so much so that his behavior off-camera began to blur with his character's defiance. He deliberately stayed in character throughout production, often antagonizing co-stars to maintain Bender's confrontational energy. His target? Molly Ringwald. Multiple accounts, including crew testimonies, claim that Nelson mocked and provoked her, even when cameras weren't rolling. At one point, his conduct grew so abrasive that John Hughes reportedly considered firing him. It took the collective persuasion of the cast, particularly Paul Gleason, who played the principal, to convince Hughes that Nelson's aggression was part of his commitment to the role. Ultimately, Nelson stayed, but the tension never completely faded. Ironically, that same intensity gave Bender the raw, unpredictable presence audiences loved. His explosive energy in detention scenes wasn't just acting, it was lived emotion. For a film centered on teenage rebellion, Nelson's unfiltered behavior embodied the spirit of its message. The incident remains a reminder of how thin the line between performance and personality can become. Sometimes, method acting creates brilliance. Other times, it almost burns the entire set down. The iconic dance scene was completely improvised. Few moments define The Breakfast Club like the spontaneous dance sequence. 5 students cutting loose in the school library, momentarily forgetting their social roles. But here's the twist. That scene wasn't in the original script. John Hughes had planned a quiet montage to symbolize the students' newfound freedom, But during filming, he encouraged the cast to just move however you feel. What followed was an unchoreographed burst of energy. Molly Ringwald's spins, Anthony Michael Hall's awkward jumps, Ali Sheedy's twitchy movements, all unscripted and entirely authentic. This raw improvisation turned a filler scene into one of the most beloved sequences in movie history. It captured what The Breakfast Club was truly about, breaking free from stereotypes and being unapologetically yourself. Interestingly, Hughes almost cut the scene entirely, fearing it felt too music video-like. Ringwald, however, convinced him to keep it, arguing that it represented the emotional release the group needed. He listened, and the result became cinematic magic. Every shuffle, every awkward gesture was real, an outpouring of joy from a cast that had spent weeks confined together in emotional intensity. It's proof that sometimes the most unforgettable movie moments aren't scripted, they're felt. John Hughes wrote the script in just 2 days. One of the most enduring high school dramas of all time was written in a creative blur. John Hughes famously penned The Breakfast Club in just 2 days, reportedly between 36 and 48 hours. Locked in his Chicago home, Hughes wrote furiously, drawing from his own high school experiences and frustrations with adult hypocrisy. He later described the process as a purge, saying the dialogue poured out of him faster than he could type. The result was a script that felt painfully honest, raw, and timeless. Studio executives initially dismissed it as too talky, doubting that audiences would sit through a film set entirely in one room. But Hughes fought to keep it that way. He wanted the film to feel like a therapy session, a conversation between strangers who become mirrors for one another. That 2-day writing spree birthed one of the most influential teen movies ever made. It redefined the genre, shifted Hollywood's view of adolescent storytelling, and launched the Brat Pack era into pop culture history. Hughes later admitted he was surprised by the film's longevity, claiming he just wanted to write something honest. What started as a burst of creative energy became a generation-defining masterpiece. The film's poster was shot before the movie was even made. Before the first line was filmed, the world already had its first glimpse of The Breakfast Club. The iconic poster, 5 teens piled together in defiance and boredom, was photographed weeks before principal shooting even began. Photographer Annie Leibovitz, known for her legendary Rolling Stone portraits, staged the entire cast for a promotional shoot to set the movie's visual tone. The problem? The actors had yet to fully develop their characters. They didn't even know how their on-screen relationships would unfold. This pre-production shoot forced them to improvise emotional chemistry long before the cameras rolled. Interestingly, Judd Nelson's slouch and Ringwald's detached pose in that image perfectly foreshadowed their characters' tension, pure coincidence that became movie history. What's even stranger is that some crew members later said the shoot almost fell apart due to scheduling conflicts. Emilio Estevez was still wrapping another film, and Nelson hadn't yet been officially confirmed. Yet, that single promotional image went on to become one of cinema's most recognizable posters, symbolizing teenage rebellion long before the story was even filmed. In retrospect, the photo's spontaneity captured exactly what The Breakfast Club came to represent: imperfect, raw authenticity. The film's visual identity was born before its story took shape. Emilio Estevez was originally cast as Bender. In an alternate universe, Emilio Estevez would have been the rebellious John Bender instead of the clean-cut Andrew Clark. Originally, director John Hughes cast Estevez as Bender, the role that eventually went to Judd Nelson. But things didn't quite fit. When casting began, Estevez delivered a solid performance during readings, but Hughes quickly realized the role demanded a darker, more volatile energy. Nelson's audition captured the raw defiance Hughes envisioned for Bender, prompting a major switch. Estevez was then reassigned to play Andrew, the athlete, a move that reshaped the movie's entire chemistry. The irony runs deep. Estevez initially resisted the change, arguing that he connected more with the rebel archetype than the jock. But Hughes convinced him that playing Andrew would give him a chance to explore vulnerability beneath athletic bravado. The role reversal paid off. Estevez's emotional locker room monologue remains one of the most powerful scenes in the film, an unguarded confession that might never have happened had he stayed in the Bender role. This casting twist shows how serendipity often defines great cinema. A single change in casting altered the balance of personalities, and made the Breakfast Club dynamic so perfectly imperfect. A deleted scene revealed a totally different ending. Most viewers remember The Breakfast Club ending with Judd Nelson's triumphant fist pump in slow motion, but that wasn't always the plan. The original script had an entirely different, much darker conclusion. In the deleted ending, after the students finish detention, Principal Vernon finds a handwritten letter exposing his hypocrisy. He storms through the empty halls as the students leave, vowing revenge. The scene was shot, but ultimately cut for pacing and tone. Hughes feared it would undercut the emotional high of the final sequence. Even stranger, there was another unused scene involving Carl the janitor, played by John Capellos, where he discovers the group's letter in the trash and reads it aloud with a knowing smirk. It hinted that Carl, not Vernon, understood them best. Both scenes would have given the film a more cynical conclusion, emphasizing that the adults never change. But Hughes wanted a sense of emotional resolution and left audiences with Bender's victorious gesture instead, a symbol of rebellion, hope, and defiance. These deleted endings have circulated in script archives for years and reveal a fascinating what if about the film's tone. Without the now famous fist pump, The Breakfast Club might not have become the anthem of teen liberation it is today. There was almost a sequel. Yes, John Hughes once considered making The Breakfast Club 2, but his plan was nothing like the lighthearted reunion fans might imagine. In interviews during the late 1980s, Hughes revealed he wanted to revisit the same characters a decade later, each struggling with adult versions of their teenage identities. Bender would be in trouble with the law, Claire trapped in an unhappy marriage, Andrew working a corporate job he hated, Allison dealing with mental health struggles, and Brian battling disillusionment after college. Unfortunately, creative disputes ended the idea before it began. Hughes and Judd Nelson reportedly clashed so severely during and after production that Hughes refused to work with him again. Without Bender, the sequel simply wouldn't work. Molly Ringwald also expressed discomfort with reprising her teenage persona, saying she wanted to move beyond the high school girl archetype. With the cast divided, Hughes shelved the project permanently. It remains one of Hollywood's most intriguing what could have beens. The fact that Hughes once envisioned a darker continuation suggests he saw The Breakfast Club not just as a teen movie, but as a lifelong metaphor for identity and alienation. The movie was preserved in the National Film Registry. In 2016, The Breakfast Club received one of cinema's highest honors, induction into the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. It was chosen for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. This recognition cemented its status as more than just a teen film. It became an official piece of American cultural heritage, a story that captured the psychology of adolescence and the universal struggle for identity. The Registry praised the movie's honest portrayal of youth in the 1980s, highlighting its enduring impact on storytelling and social dialogue. Few teen-centered films have achieved such status, standing alongside classics like Star Wars and The Godfather. It marked the culmination of John Hughes' mission to make young voices matter on screen. For audiences, the honor reaffirmed what they already knew, that The Breakfast Club transcends generations. Each viewing feels new because every generation finds itself somewhere in that Saturday detention room. From controversial beginnings and near firings to its preservation as a cultural treasure, the journey of The Breakfast Club proves that the strangest stories often produce the most lasting legacies. Decades after its release, The Breakfast Club remains more than a film. It's a mirror held up to youth, identity, and rebellion. What began as a low-budget story about 5 kids in detention became a timeless reflection on human connection. Every fact behind its making, from feuds to improvisations, only deepens its meaning. In that silent library, the world saw itself, awkward, flawed, and searching for understanding. Maybe that's why The Breakfast Club still endures, because in the end, we're all just trying to be heard, even after the detention bell rings.